Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about episode 5 of Marvel's Loki, entitled Journey Through Mystery. Or is it Into Mystery? Sorry, Journey Into Mystery. I'm like, that doesn't feel right. Journey Into Mystery. I think title's pretty self-explanatory here. The mystery would be this place called the Void, guarded by Eliath, what looks to be some sort of cloud slash smoke monster that devours everything there. I have. Let me start by saying how much I've enjoyed this series. Every week I get in front of this camera and I gush about how fun or interesting these episodes have been. And having said that, I'm a little bit disappointed by this one, if I'm being honest. This does not seem to be the prevailing opinion, but I think that's because I think what was trying to be done here was largely accomplished, which is why the prevailing opinion is not, I had problems with this episode. The reason I say that is because this episode felt like you have the ending of episode 4 with, Mobius getting pruned, Loki getting pruned. We find out the timekeepers aren't real. Sylvie has a whatever those things are that they prune with pointed at Ravonna. Is like, tell me everything you know. Loki wakes up in a mysterious world. It's like, okay, we have a whole lot to deal with in these final 2 episodes. And what it feels like happened is that all of that is mainly going to get dealt with in the last episode. Like, we're going to find out who's behind the TVA and all of what's going on in the next episode. And they just needed a bridge to get from the end of episode 4 to episode 6. And it's like, okay, we'll just strand our characters in this void place and throw in a shit ton of Easter eggs and fan service and hope that they don't notice that there's not a lot going on here. And that's how I feel about this episode. All the Easter eggs were really cool. There was so many, I'm not even going to bother trying to run them down. I inevitably forget 1 or 2 or however many, and then people will be in the comments like, you forgot this one. Like, okay, there's like 60 Easter eggs in this episode, so I'm not even gonna name one. I'm just gonna let it be known there's a ton of Easter eggs in here, and I feel like that, combined with having a whole bunch of Lokis having a ridiculous fight with like an alligator. Well, we've all been calling a crocodile. They call it an alligator in the episode. All these different Lokis having a fight, I think was all supposed to kind of like register with us as the fans. Like, oh man, this is really cool and fun. And we're not going to register that this episode really didn't do much. And like I didn't even find really the fighting stuff to be interesting. Like to me, it crossed over from, you have the really good fight at the end of episode 4 with Loki, Sylvie, Ravonna, and whatever Loki version of stormtroopers they had in there. But then this one you have just like, it's just chaos. It's chaotic with no real point or purpose, because these are all characters that we either just met 45 seconds ago in this episode or at the very end of the previous one. And it's just a scene of chaos, and it felt like they were taking it too far. It's like, okay, this isn't even entertaining to me at this point. I don't know any of these characters. There's like 20 characters on screen fighting all at one time. The only thing good about it is that Loki looked embarrassed. Like, look at all these lesser versions of myself. They're embarrassing me. But I didn't find that scene to be entertaining. I felt like it was messy and sloppy and pointless. And I that kind of fan service doesn't particularly work for me, especially when it's like super overt. Like it felt like, hey, look at all this chaos over here, so that you're not looking at the not much going on over here aspect. So I wasn't a big fan of this episode. I enjoyed the fan service and Easter eggs for what it was, but I felt like they laid it on thick to cover up the fact that there's not a lot of meat on the bones of this episode. And then I didn't like also the whole concept of the void, right? I liked it at first, the idea like, hey, this is where we, branched realities go to die. Like, they all collide here, and as Ravonna said, they simply stop. And it could be because it's the end of time. And then Sylvie goes, well, what's past that? Nothing. It's the end of it's what the end of time means. It's like there's nothing past that. So that made sense to me. Like, you could send these people here to a place where there is no progression. Like, you just live out your days in this void of nothingness. And although it wasn't nothing, it should have been, but it wasn't. And that made sense. But then she goes, well, what's past that? And then Rhoda goes, I don't know. I'm like, what you mean you don't know? There shouldn't be anything past it. That's why it's called a void. You just said 30 seconds ago it's at the end of time. So like, I don't like the idea that they can say, hey, this void exists at the end of time. And then they go, well, what about what's past that? Well, nothing should be past that. But apparently there is something past that. And I didn't particularly care for that. Like, so they kind of lost me on that. And then I thought, and then this episode also, I think, lacked a lot of, you know, when we're watching these comic book movies or shows, we suspend disbelief because there's, you know, it's comic books. There's gonna be magic. There's gonna be all characters are gonna die and come back. There's all kinds of things that we can't compare to what happens in the real world. So we have to suspend some of that and just kind of, you know, go with the flow and accept that there's some stuff that's gonna happen that's not gonna be very plausible. But this one just turned the implausibility dial up a little bit high. Like, okay, so this Alioth is what looks to be a cloud monster or smoke monster, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't seem to have a physical form. It just seems to be cloud and smoke and mist or whatever, right? And then Loki has the plan of, we're going to kill it. Like, I've been taught throughout the entirety of the MCU that Loki is smart. And to have Loki look at this cloud monster and go, I'm going to kill it. You're gonna stab it. It's made out of smoke. You're gonna stab it, and then Sylvie comes along, who's supposed to be even smarter than our Loki, and goes, "I'm gonna enchant it," and then they do it. How do you enchant a smoke being? Like, I don't know, man. Like I said, there's sometimes I can dismiss a lot of things as like, oh, this is just comic book shit, but like, just make the thing something a little bit more of a physical being, so that way killing it or enchanting it feels plausible. It feels like something I can accept. Whereas if you talking about you're gonna enchant a cloud, I can't really roll with that. Like, that's just not, that doesn't work for me. So like, I don't know. They did not hit the mark for me. Even the way they played it out, because I'm sitting there like, how are you going to visually show me her enchanting a cloud? And one, you don't like, it looks as stupid as it sounds. Like, they're like grasping like black smoke. You can see the green, which lets you know that there's some Loki magic going on. And then all of a sudden it just, I don't know, dissipates and opens up like a doorway. And I don't know. I'm just like, what is the enchantment? Like, it's not even an actual being. Like, what did you enchant? Like just pour some fucking water on it and it's gone. Like, whatever. Let me see what else I had to talk about. I mentioned the Easter eggs, the fact it felt like filler, the bridging between the two episodes. I talked about the plausibility or lack thereof, my issues with the void. So those are all the things that I had issues with. But let me talk about some of the things that I did like. I even though I felt like the Easter eggs were kind of present in order to mask the fact that there was going to be a lot of like ridiculous and plausible shit happening in this episode, and it was really just meant to serve as a bridge between 4 and 6. Again, the Easter eggs were still kind of cool to see some of that stuff. And then what I particularly liked, there's two really good parts of this episode. The first is one that, from what I've looked at, the fandom seems to be a bigger fan of, which is when classic Loki projects an entire Asgard to distract Alioth. And then eventually he ends up sacrificing himself. And I like the fact that he said glorious purpose, because if you've watched all of these videos, including the deep dives, you see I in particular have been really hung up on the glorious purpose thing and how that meant one thing to Loki at the start of this series, and I think will mean something entirely different at the end of the series. So I've been really hung up on the glorious purpose thing, and I like the fact that classic Loki found his. Like, this was his glorious purpose. And I like that. And it's a positive thing. So I thought that was a cool scene. The internet seems to be a real big fan of this scene, because I read some tweets regarding this episode. People are like, I cried. And I'm like, okay, what? I don't know how you I don't know how you live in the real world if that makes you cry. I really don't. Like, it's a character that was just introduced. We know nothing of this character other than the fact that he is dressed like the classic Loki. And he tells this story, which is the only thing that makes this, which is what makes the scene impactful, is the story of how he essentially ended up being stuck here. I'm not going to relay it, but And then it was like he creates an Asgard, and then he ends up dying at the hands of this smoke monster who we also just met. And people were like, I cried during that. Like, man, what happens to you people if something actually sad happens, like in your real life? Like, do you just like, do you just implode? Like, I don't like if you cry at at a Loki that we just met creating a fake city and dying. I just don't know how you navigate life. Like, I feel like everything makes you cry. Like, I'm out of milk. Like, okay. I'm gonna stop. But I did still think that scene was pretty good. And the scene that I actually liked the most out of the episode was the scene where Loki and Sylvie kind of connect. They're sitting outside from everyone else, and they're preparing for this dousing of this smoke monster. And Loki, Loki's putting the moves on her pretty clearly. He like conjures up a blanket. He offers her to conjure her up one. He puts it around her. She kind of like, it seems like she kind of leans into him, puts her hand, like they're having a moment. And what I thought was cool about that scene, two things. The first thing is that I like the fact that she asked him, how do I know you won't betray me? And my immediate response is, you don't. Like, at the end of the day, he's still Loki. And he even says, I've changed, I'm not like that anymore. Which made me wonder, and this, I feel like I'm going to unintentionally spoil something by saying this. It makes me wonder if she's going to betray him at the end of this, which would completely destroy him. And I could totally see that happening. But for what it's worth, I thought that moment was good because it was Loki kind of saying, like, I'm not like that anymore. Like, he's clearly into her. And she has maintained the idea that he could still betray her because he is still Loki. But we as a fandom and the show as a whole has kind of diverted away from the fact that she is also a Loki and she is also deceptive. And it just makes me wonder, like, we're sitting here getting all these nice little warm vibes from Loki and Sylvie, and Loki's clearly into her. And I'm just wondering if she's playing him, and that would suck, man. Now that's something that you can actually feel some emotion for. Like, if she crushes him like that at the end of this, then if some people are like, I cried there, I'd be like, okay, I get it. Like, it's not, it's not real, but like, whatever, I get it. Like, that's a payoff that they built up toward. Like that's an emotional moment that is earned by the show. Where like crying during the, okay, I'm not even gonna do it. I'm not even gonna do it. What the fuck are you crying for that? But what I really liked about that scene was the fact that he shared the blanket. And the fact that the reason I like that is because Loki is half frost giant. He doesn't get cold. Like, he's really just trying to put the moves on her, man. He's just really trying to smash. And like, hey, Loki's gonna Loki, man. He's deceptive. He's deceptive even when he's being romantic. And I dig that. What else? Oh, and then the other thing that I really liked, I liked when, I liked us getting Mobius back, period. Because I wondered at the end of the last episode if everyone they prune goes to whatever this place is, or if it's some kind of like setting on it that made only Loki go there. I didn't know, right? But we get Mobius back, which is great. And speaking of which, isn't it interesting how this place where every single branched reality goes to die somehow only consists of the people that we know from this show? It's like Loki's, Mobius, and Sylvie. Like, oh, how interesting is that? Aside from the Easter eggs, obviously, but yeah, I mean, you could still justify that by looking at it like, okay, Alioth kills everything as soon as it comes in there anyway. So it and the Loki survived because they're Lokis and that's what they do. And Mobius got there for 5 minutes before Loki did. So it's plausible that we could only see Loki's and those handful of people in that time. But I still thought that was kind of funny. Like, man, every branch reality goes here to die, yet it only consists of Loki's, Mobius, and Sylvie. But anyway, I like getting Mobius back. That was just great to see. I like the moment when Loki hugs him before he goes back. And then when from Loki's perspective, Mobius whispers in his ear, "You're my favorite," but we see that he's looking at Sylvie, and I thought that was really nice. So, really cool moments in this episode, but I think they're a little overshadowed by some of the ridiculousness. I think it did feel like filler. There wasn't too much going on here aside from the handful of things that I just mentioned. But I'm willing, as great as this show has been up to this point, and this is not a bad episode. It's just an episode that had more stuff that I didn't like than usual, which is anything, because I didn't have anything that I didn't like in the first four. So for this one to be the first one that comes along, it has some stuff where I'm just kind of like, if that's the worst thing I can say about this show is that it had one episode where I went, that's still a pretty glowing endorsement. So, and the episode was still enjoyable. It's just like I said, it just had some stuff that I'm just like, oh, come on, man. But that's all I got for right now. I'll be back with a deep dive early next week with Delvin and Axel and possibly another guest, Andy, who you would have seen. I believe Andy showed up on one of our Falcon and Winter Soldier deep dives. I'm not 100% sure, but we'll be back early next week with the deep dive for episode 5, and then the finale next Wednesday for episode 6. And I'll see you guys then. Peace.